Hello YouTube, the Rubricker here. Okay, we're going to do one last video with the ball factory. There have been several things that have come up, improvements, just little things to make it run a little more stably, and also some requests to do just a video of setting up the timing. So we're going to set up this, we're going to take it right down to the 12 components, and we're going to first of all run through some of the changes that have been made to make it run more efficiently, and then we're going to build just the 12 components into the working machine. So we're going to set up the timing, make sure it runs smoothly, and then show you how that all happens in one video. So here we go. Let's take it apart. Alright, to start this build, we need a board. These are 48 by 48 boards. And there goes the 2 by 6 plates that I need to put the other board on. So it goes up. The first component that we're going to put on is the main drive mechanism. This one's easy to line up. It goes right to the corner of the board, and we've already set up the timing for this one in the actual build video for this one. I'm going to trust that that timing has not adjusted. Other than that, just to show that I've got this at whatever point, I'm just going to rotate this, and that's backwards. Make sure to rotate forwards. It's some random point. So this isn't going to fall together. I want to make sure that I'm building this for you. The next part is the load shift, or the load wheel turner. I gotta stop calling these by the wrong name. That slides in. There we go. And right where that slides in, everything else just presses down onto the board. Guess what? The timing is wrong, and that's okay, because we're gonna get that all lined up. This, I want to make sure it goes together with bad timing, because that's the point of this video. Next up is the load wheel. So the load wheel mounts with the extra hardware pointing back towards the main drive. Now let's give this a turn so that this is rounded on this side, and we'll turn the load wheel so that it is straight perpendicular, and we will just line up 2 of those pins right in here. And as long as that's straight, right in there, you should be able to drop the whole thing onto the board. There we go. And you know it's straight if it lines up with that top cap. Let's grab our battery box with its safety. And let's make sure it's working. In fact, we could even drop it into place, and it just sits right, those 1 by 3 bricks that it has attached to it sits right on the board, and the wire goes underneath, and it's 1 stud away here. Press that down. Oh, make sure that wire is flat, and we press it down. There we go. We can turn that on. And what we're looking to see is that the wheel turns. Again, there's nothing going on right now that is going to affect the timing. There's no buckets being loaded, unloaded, etc. So I don't need to explain that to you too much. Next, we're going to place the load shifter, and this comes in pretty simply off the ends of the 2 arms is how these arms attach. That's 1. We're going to undo these like that, melt that guy on, and do this back up. There we go. Just make sure everything's all nice and snug. And this lines up to the back of the board here. And And you'll notice here it's 3 studs from the end and right to the back of the board. So we can press that down. And this all sits right in place. Make sure everything's pressed down nicely. Don't press on the axles. The pivot point here that we're working with is exactly 1 empty stud on an angle from the base to this. So it sits right there. That's right there. Everything's in place. And if we run it, looks good. All right. Next up, we have Bob. Before we put Bob on, let's move this out of the way. I told you this is going to be a full-on timing video, and because of the change that I made to attach Bob here, keep that light from glaring, we've changed the way this works for the gearing and how the gears line up, and right now this is not set up. So I'm going to pop those 2x3 plates off, separate the 2 gears, right? So you know how these are. The way these gears line up, this has to be vertical. So we can lock that there. And this guy has to also be vertical. So we'll sit that vertical, we'll sit this one vertical as best we can. So that when they're both vertical, they move in opposite directions. So when they're both vertical, that's where we want it. So we're going to take this and we'll lock it into place. 1, 2, and 3. This will not come undone, or it shouldn't. If it does, something's horribly out of place. And then this, because we got the new wall there, you just slide together, and obviously this guy here. So give the machine a twist. We'll bring it in. Let's pop the load wheel off. Give it just a gentle rotation. It should just come off with those Technic bricks. And we'll put Bob in place. As you can see, drops in, it'll go right through there. So let's get this popped apart like that. And we'll slide that gear off like that. And just set it off to the side. And we'll move this in. Now that goes through the first available hole right in here. So it's the first hole, and there's 3 empties beyond that. And this will mount. Here, let me give it a twist just to show you that we're going to have the timing off. Okay. So this mounts in here. And we'll grab our gear. We'll slide it onto the axle here and bring that axle all the way into the connector. The 1x4 goes in, and that just locks down. And of course, my new wall, and my old wall have come apart. That's okay. We can adjust. 1, 2, 3. Okay. That's got everything in place there. Make sure that gear is sitting straight. Everything's in place. Now, this guy is, yeah, he's wherever he is. Now, this sits 4 studs from the back and pretty much self-lines up because you want to keep this axle straight. So press down, that's lined up. The travel of this guy, let's see here. how can we do this? Well, before we get that put in place, this is the part that helps him turn. We'll get that mounted in. Can be tricky. Line's right up on the edge there, and you can see one stud on an angle in between. That goes in. There we go. And it's a matter of getting this placed. I actually believe we're going to have to figure this out, and this is why we're doing this video. Let's get this running. So I've brought this cam all the way to the very back, which is this pulled all the way in that direction, which should be Bob pushed all the way in this direction, right flat against the wall. Let's press that down and see how we look here with this functioning. Not bad. Comes all the way forward, goes all the way back. That's exactly what we're looking for. Slight bit of a struggle. Seems it goes further this side than that side. Let's see if we can make an adjustment to that. Okay, so the adjustment, actually this is in a good spot. And if you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 studs, this is actually a good spot. We're pretty darn close. Just a matter of making sure that we make our adjustments on the bushings at this end. So it's got to go just a teeny bit further. There we go. And just increase the gap and see what we get. So what we're looking for is that it comes all the way and sits square. It's a little bit slack at either end. So we're just going to tighten this up and see if that tightens up the movement. There we go, that's actually looking straighter. Now that this timing of Bob is set, it's not set with everything else. But at this point, we could set some of this timing. As you can see, when Bob gets here, he should be ready to grab a bucket which would slide towards him. And as you can see from the way that timing is working, that's not the case. Bob is also picking up and dropping at the wrong time. He's picking up when he should be dropping and dropping when he should be picking up. And that adjustment is right here on this gear. So let's get Bob right ready to pick up. And so that's where he's ready for a bucket to come to him. And at the same time, let's get him ready to pick up, which will be this guy turning in this direction. So not quite all the way there, but close. We'll fine-tune that in a sec. Right now he's ready to pick up, which means we need the load shifter to be ready to shift a load onto him. To do that, grab this axle, hold this connector, and just disconnect. So now the load turner, Bob is now not going to do anything. And we can actually just run this, and it's just the shifter again. So let's get it back in frame, just the shifter is running, it's nothing else. And where we want it is right there, so it's just about to shift that way. See? So it's just about to shift that way, and if you look down in here, it's right about to connect to get it to shift that way. So that's actually exactly where we want it. You can grab the gears and fine adjust. You see how it's starting to move? And we'll just lock this axle back in to the closest point we can lock it in. There we go. Now when we run it, seems a tiny bit too soon. Adjust the camera a bit. Seems like Bob doesn't have time to lift as soon as he's getting a bucket. So what we can do is we'll disconnect down here, and we can move it a quarter turn forward. That might be the wrong direction. Let's find out. Yeah, see, Bob's already leaving as the load is shifting. So Bob's been moved too far forward. So again, we'll disconnect. We'll move this back. You can tell what's forward and what's back by the direction that that's turning. So I'll move it back about a 1/2 to 3/4 turn rotation. And let's fire that up again. Perfect. Now all we gotta do is get the bucket, or get Bob lifting at exactly the right time. He's lifting a little too late. So what we want to do is advance this so that he's lifting a little bit sooner. We got a lot of precision we can work with here. Now he's lifting a touch too soon. He's lifting just as the bucket's getting into him. So we'll back it up a bit. Doop, doop, doop. About 2 teeth. And maybe a couple more. No, that's too far back because now he's turning away before he's lifted. So we have to advance this just a touch. That's good timing for Bob, which means we need the load shifter to shift just a little bit sooner, which means we got to bring Bob back a little bit. So we'll disconnect here. We'll rotate backwards. 1, 2, so that's 1/2. So that's 1/2 a rotation on that axle. Let's have a look. Oh, that's perfect. So some of these timing things, they're easier to set up now than later. That's perfect. We got that part done. You can even tell what's going on. Oh, sorry, you can't tell what's going on because we haven't set this. We can set the load turner. So now we know where Bob is supposed to be at the time of getting this done. This load wheel turner has to turn not when Bob is putting down a bucket. See? That's no good. And you can see this is crashing under here. That's all kinds of wrong. Oh, and I put this on backwards. Make sure when you take this off, it's that way that it sits, where it's more towards that side. That was my mistake, but we're going to see all the possible mistakes. There we go. Let's see how that looks now. Wow, we're just crashing into all kinds of stuff here. What's going on? Okay, so it turns out Bob seems a little bit angry with the positioning of this. Let's see if we can pop these 2x3 plates off without disconnecting our 2 sides. One of them stayed on, that's good. 2. And what we're going to do is we're going to move it. It has to be there. No, we're not going to move it. It has to be there. So what's going on is this is getting a little too tight and he's dropping a little too low. I'm just going to tighten that up just a touch. And let's fire it up. So the issue we're having then is that this is hitting the wheel, and that's fine because we know this is not at the right spot. See, it's rotating as Bob's bringing a bucket. And that change is made here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take off this little half bushing that we've got on here, and we're going to slide this gear back. Now, you can tell when this will rotate. Oh, it's getting jammed there. So let's get it through the rotation, probably about halfway, and we'll lock the gear back in. Let's run it. Now what we're seeing is perfect. It's rotating while Bob is away. It could even rotate a little bit sooner. So Bob has just moved out of the way. Let's advance this with the gear disengaged to right where it starts to rotate. And we'll lock that back in. Let's have a look. Perfect. Couldn't time that better. Let's make sure that we got our bushing back on here to make sure it's locked into place. Just like that. All right. Let's drop the conveyor system into place. This is easier said than done, but there are parts that will help. So we've got our fully built conveyor system, and I'm doing this way because I had seen that some had built all the parts but didn't actually put them on the board, and they were planning to do that afterwards. So I figured this would be a great way to demonstrate how to do this. I'm going to remove the load wheel, same way we did before. Just make sure that you put it back the right way. And this actually mounts quite nicely. And it lines up by putting it on top of the load shifter. And as you're dropping everything into place, let's see if we can get a better angle here. This pops into the first hole there. There's a 1x4 Technic brick, which I've been meaning to put a tile on top of just to tidy that up. There we go. That's in, which then helps to line all of this up. This sits right above, right here, above the rest of the assembly. That will line up. And before we put that into place, put the exit ramp in because of that there. So let's get this into place. And just so you can see where this actually mounts, it's right here. 4 studs, 1, 2, 3, 4, from the edge of this and right to the edge of the board. We'll press that down into place, as well as the back. And this guy, press down onto the lower part, that presses down there. This is 3 studs from the end, and really with this it can go right up to the battery box. That is totally fine. In fact, it helps line up the battery box, gives you good support in the corner. You can press that down. Everything else just presses into place. So make sure it's lined up with studs on the board, press it all into place. Just like that. There we go. Lift this up so we can get that primed and ready. This gear is ready. Okay. We have our gear. What we'll do is we'll pull the gear off, and the axle is going to go through. Let's give this a rotation here. The axle tucks in here, goes through. It's a little bit tight. Let's loosen that off just a bit, just so it's not raising it quite as high. We don't want to be jamming this in there. It's just lifting it as high as it can lift it. So that's about the max height, and we'll put the gear onto the other side. All right. Timing is not set up, and we're okay with that. While we're in here, let's get this connected. There we go. Full connection there. And we'll get this guy connected. Now remember, you want these to be opposite each other. Otherwise you get that weird intermittent movement. So if you look at how this one, that part of the U-joint or the universal joint, they line up, that'll keep it moving evenly and smoothly, and you won't have any weird issues. I don't even know what that's called or why that happens, but just something that happens with U-joints if they're connected in exactly the same direction. There's some play in them, and you don't want to have that happen. So make sure that axle's pushed in nicely. There we go. And we can fire it up. Now just recently, someone came up with another issue. They noticed that this conveyor belt was jaggy. It was kind of jumping a little bit. Let me create the issue, and then I'll show you what it is that causes it. See how it's, I don't know if the video's picking up or not. You might be able to hear it. It's jumping and jaggy. What that is this right here is catching underneath on the conveyor. So we press this down and make sure that this is, you know, nice and flat. There's exactly enough clearance. Now it's smooth, it's not jaggy, and it's running nicely. So that's got that part done. Now we've got the, this is the gear that moves the bucket unloader, unloads them from the load wheel. And we've built this before where these mount onto this gear, like this. Actually, let me just check something first. For the sake of setting up the timing of this, and this will help, give that a turn. So you see this piece here, we're now perpendicular. This is flat. We're going to match the levers here to that angle. So as you can see, flat, flat. And we'll get the part there put in, and we will insert this so that it lines up with this gear. Now, again, I don't even know if running this will do anything bad just because of the way that's probably not lined up. Oh, that works. The way you want to line it up, so that we can set the timing, let's just manually advance this. Now, when you're advancing manually, make sure that your load wheel is turning clockwise. So we're going to advance this so that this is perfectly perpendicular. And the reason why is, if we pull this back, we want that gear to also be as close to perpendicular as possible. So if you're looking at it now, this guy is straight up and down, this guy is as close to straight up and down as is reasonably possible. So when we turn it on, going back and forth. Now, as you can see, picking up, dropping at all the wrong times. Well, pretty much all the wrong times. Now that adjustment is on here, on this gear. And the way we do that is we get it to a point where we want it to pick up. We just lost our timing here. Careful as this guy slips in and out. And you want to also have it in a reasonably good spot. So we'll advance this just by hand. So straight perpendicular, that's looking good. Let's hold this in place, turn it on. So right there is roughly where we want this to be picking up. Turning this way, let's disconnect the 8-tooth gear, and we'll rotate this guy to where he's just starting to engage and pick up, and we'll re-engage that gear. So now when we turn this on, make sure we hold this in place if you're using this style. Picks up, drops, picks up, drops, picks up, drops. That's looking perfect. So that's got that in place and the timing set up. This is going to be actually really easy. We can probably put the load wheel back on again and see how this is all interacting. Just make sure when you press down, you're not going to press down on the load wheel turner. Hold this in place. Okay, so we have a little issue here. It's not terrible. It's manageable. Ideally, the way you want the machine working, you want Bob to come back and put a bucket back the same time that the bucket unloader comes and takes a bucket away. That way, everything comes into the middle at once. Everything moves away as the load wheel turns. So we're a little bit off here. Bob's early. Now Bob is set up with the timing of that, so let's try and adjust this guy. He just needs to be a little bit sooner. So, what would make him sooner? Let's take the load wheel off. And what adjusts the timing for him is here. So instead of putting it at this level, we're going to move it a quarter turn. So we'll just disconnect that from the gear. Go a quarter turn back, so we're going to catch the other end of that we're going to line up with and press that into place. So it's actually in this direction, which matches that. Let's see where we sit here. Not quite perpendicular, so we'll advance and get that straight up and down. About there. Okay, now that we've adjusted this, we might have to adjust when it goes up and down, but let's have a look. Yeah, we have to adjust when it's up and down, but it's moving in and out of the center at the same time as Bob. So let's get this to where we want to pick up. Right there is where we want to pick up. We'll disconnect the 8-tooth gear, rotate this forward to our pickup point, and probably pretty good. Let's put that load wheel back in carefully. All right, let's fire this up and see how this looks. Perfect. All right, now we're ready to move on to the next piece, which will be the ramp part and the ball dumper. So we have the lower part of the ball dumper, which, remember, we've got that change now with that 1x6 brick on there. Now that is going to line up. Let's lift this out of the way and bring this in. A little trickier to drop this in now because we've got that longer axle, but it's definitely worth having the longer axle. So that drops into place. I'll press that down. That axle is just sitting there, which we can move that brick. No big deal. Lines up perfectly. We've got our gear that we have to feed into this as our connector. Let's pop that universal joint off. We got our gear that we're going to put in. And our axle. And we'll line that up and press that into place. So that's in place. Again, timing here, not set up. Really not worried, because we're going to look at that in a second. To make this easier, let's take from this, we'll take this 1x2 Technic brick and we'll mount it into place. Let's take this off. It goes into that first hole, just like that. Okay, so we'll have a 1x1 brick. Now this, before we put that on, let's put our ramp in place, or our deck. So we'll just pull that out. This lines up, just slides under the chain. There we go. Bob stays out of the way. And that lines right up perfectly. There we go. And everything presses into place. Perfect. Now we can put the dumper into place. And again, that all just lines up. Especially that back part. This sits on top. Press that into place. It's amazing how quickly this becomes complicated. Now, let's move the load wheel again. And in here, this has to connect down to this pin down here. You see the pin down there? Okay. We gotta get that connected. Now, what you can do is just connect it from this end and then pull the dumper into place, connect it, make sure everything's in place, and we'll put our load shifter back on. Now this dumper I don't think is in the right spot. Let's find out. Let's run the machine and see if it's dumping while the load is shifting. If it is, that is bad. Yep, that's bad. Which is good, because we're going to show you how to do this. So the dumper is supposed to dump while the load shifter is resetting back to the beginning when it's pulled back. So right here, it should already be dumping, it should be dropping it, it should not be moving forward. Because we've added the ball dumper and everything else, the timing is set, let's adjust the timing of the dumper. And the way the timing of the dumper is set, first of all, let's see where we're off. Right now the ball dumper should be grabbing because it just moved forward. Now is the time for it to grab the bucket, dump it, and put it back. So we have to get this right down to its bottom point. Let's disconnect the drive. And the ball dumper is down when the pin down here is all the way up. So we'll pop this off so we can see what's going on. We've got room in here. We can slide the 40-tooth gear out of the way, and we can rotate this until all the way until that pin is up, and then we'll slide that gear back into place. Make sure that axle stays all the way in like it should. Should be good. And now we'll put the rest of the ball dumper back into place. No harm done. This is now all the way to its lowest point, and let's run it. Ooh, not quite right. See, it's not letting go of the bucket before it shifts. That should already be down. So, once again, disconnect, pop this off, and that should already be down. So, let's advance it a little bit more. Already down. There we go. Some of these adjustments are trial and error. It's not a problem. There's no wrong way to do it. The only wrong way is for it to not work. All right, let's check this out. It's picking up the next bucket before it shifts. Now it's moving too soon. So we got to back it up just a little bit. and that's got to move in that direction. So once again, pull this off, and this time we're going to back it up just a little bit. I'm talking like maybe 5 teeth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go 4. Drop this back on. And let's give it a try. So it moves over, comes down, lets go, shifts, and it's picking up the next one. That's touching. It is touching. Let's make sure that's down all the way. There we go. It still appears to be a teeny bit too soon. It's pretty darn close. I'm actually happy with that. If anything, it's slightly too soon, but I'm pretty happy with that. So we're going to leave that for now just to see how that's going to play out. I think we're going to be okay. And in fact, let's put this load wheel back in. There we go. Get that into place. That's all set up. And I know it's supposed to be put on at the end, but let's put the return conveyor on. And the return conveyor, just so that we finish this board, the return conveyor mounts at the back here, right through that hole with this gear. And it stands one set of studs from the edge, right here. So we'll put that gear in. And now when you're pushing on this, this is a main axle. It goes all the way to the front to the bucket wheel turner. Just hold it at the front just so you're not pushing any of the gears out of alignment, and double check inside that none of your 8-tooth gears have slid out of place, because if you lose that timing on those gears after you've come this far, that'll be frustrating. You won't be having a good time. So that's got that in place. Let's give it a run. Look at that. I'm pretty excited with this timing, and I hope you are too. So now we're going to bring in the next board, and we're going to get the rest of this set up. Here we go. All right, let's bring in our next board. So coming off of the end of this, let's see if we have room here on our filming platform. Move the tripod just a bit as we do this. All right, and we have our two 2x6 plates. 1 and 2. Make a small adjustment here. Okay. The first part that connects to the other board is the ball lifter, and that's because it has this axle here. Now we want to make sure we get this correct and set up. Now the way this connects is that slides in one stud deep on the axle, which essentially lines up all the rest of this. So that's in place, it's connected, but the key thing here is the timing. Because this is what connects to the other one, we gotta make sure the timing is right. And actually, there's not a whole lot we can do at this point. So let's get this done. I believe I tried to throw off all the timing on this. So we'll bring in the next part here, the ball loader right here. Now this guy is going to come in with an axle set on either side of the lifter. Now this comes in all the way right tight against. So if this is all the way forward, it lines up straight above the part here that lifts the balls, so that it lifts them straight into the axle. So that's the correct spot. We can press that down in all its places. And there are extra parts. These bumpers go underneath this, so it's not dropping too low. What are we hitting? So I've got that kind of in the wrong spot. Let's just lift this up a bit and rearrange that. There we go. Let me show you what's happened because that's important. This was turned that way as opposed to that way. So just make sure it's in the right spot. Now when I put this in, it'll sit better, higher, and let's move this back into place where it belongs. There we go. Now we can put that bumper onto the back. Oh, my 2x6 plate, you probably noticed it. I didn't. It's one stud too far back. This is all very precision built. So then this sits right at the edge and just ahead of that, right there. Now that sits perfectly. So that's 6 studs from the back because it sits right in front and right at the edge of the board. Now we've got a few of these, and these are various parts that are going to hold things in place. Now that axle you saw on the other side, that was misaligned. Let's see if I can get this. I'm going to take the load wheel off, and let's see if we can give this a rotation so you can see what's going on. Okay. So this piece goes right in here. There we go. Gives that some nice support right there. And then these are for this front part. And this gets pushed by this 40-tooth gear here in the front. So we're going to put these right in the middle, or this 3-stud axle in the middle. One, and there's the other side of it, just about lined up. Just got to lift. There we go. And this is 1 stud from the edge. And we'll put it right across from the other one so that when this pin hits it, it'll knock it up. Sorry, I guess that was a little out of frame. These guys. And they're right across from this guy, so it's even. And this is right in the middle hole. Okay. On this side, we've got this, and it just attaches to this pin. Let's run it. The timing should be off. I'm pretty sure I set everything to be off. I tried to. The things we're watching for is when this, let's see if I can get in closer here. When this gets all the way to this end, this pin down here triggers the dump. So when this, the ball loader, is over here, we don't want to be dumping because there's nothing there to hit. And to adjust that, it's a matter of When that gets to there, which is this all the way back, this pin should just be approaching this to dump. So it'll dump, and then it moves back out of the way. Now, I did successfully break the timing of this. You notice it's lifting the balls when it's not expecting to. Wow, okay, sorry. First things first, coincidence. Watch Bob, watch the ball, the bucket unloader, and this guy. See how they all come to the center at the same time? That is perfect. So we don't want to ruin this timing. This is perfect. What we do need to change is this. So this guy's coming up and down at the wrong time with the balls. Nothing's going to grab it. Right there is where we want it to grab. So we're going to loosen this gear here, just the second one. Pull it out. And we're going to move this to the point it's just starting to lift. So probably about there. And we'll slide that back into place. And let's have a look. I'd like that to happen just a touch sooner, because you don't want this moving away while the balls are still being lifted into place. So pull that gear back out one more time. And move that ahead just a few teeth, not a whole lot. Now it's too soon. So I moved it a little too much. So we'll back that up just a touch. There we go. Oh, that's looking perfect. Let's drop the load wheel in and see how this looks while it's functioning together. Perfect. I'm actually pretty confident in this. Let me go grab a couple of buckets and we'll give this a try. All right, let's throw some buckets on here. Ooh, you probably saw what I just saw. Buckets are getting thrown off the back there by Bob. Bob, if anyone's going to cause trouble in this system, it's Bob. He is a little bit quick with the moving the buckets. Okay, found what's wrong. If you see here, Bob has caught the edge. He has not lifted the bucket high enough, soon enough. So he's pulling away before he's lifted the bucket. These are the annoying timing issues that you're going to have with this system. So what we got to do is get Bob moving the bucket away a little bit later. And it's the tricky part because you've got to know what to adjust and where. So Bob's moving the bucket too soon. I would say, hey, let's adjust when he lifts the bucket. That would be easy. Yes and no. Because of when he lifts the bucket is based on this gear and it's timed with also when this lifts, it's not the thing to change. We want to just change when he moves. And so we adjust that on this gear here. He's moving too soon, and if we go forward that way, we want to move it back a couple of teeth so he moves a little bit later. And because of this extra wall in here now, what we got to do is we lift this off and slide it away. Move this, hold on here, which way is forward? Forward is that way, so we want to move this back just a few teeth. Like that. And we'll put this back into place there. Okay. Now, hopefully that didn't throw off a whole pile of other stuff. Let's see how we're looking. Load wheel back into place. Bob's ready to go. Oh, that's better. I am going to stop saying words like "that's better." Clearly, Bob is having a tantrum, but we're okay with that. We're going to keep loading buckets in and just see how everything else is looking. A lot of it is being observant. What's going on? These seem to fit a little bit tight. It bounces the bucket up a bit. Just moving those apart for how Bob grips it. There we go. A little softer in his grip. Let's send a few more down. We do have 21 buckets to load into the system. There we go. Bob's working nicely with them. And I'll just keep loading the rest into here. Yeah, I saw that too. Bob, buddy, what you got going on? There we go. So, how good is this timing? Well, let's drop some balls in. That's functional to me. All right. Now, if that's the case, then all we have left to do is put the elevator and the hopper in. And let's start with the elevator. So once again, let's get this rotated into position so we can see what's going on here. So the elevator, the drive is going to attach here. So here's our drive assembly. That gear comes off, slides in, reattaches, just like that. And now we've got this, which we have to figure out where that's going to go. And the way that's going to work is, let's put the elevator in place. And the elevator lines up so that there we go, so that ramp is going to line up there. So that's going to be right there. So with that mostly lined up, we'll just lift this up. Okay, so we got that lined up. Let's pull this off and show you where that is. If you want to count the studs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 from this edge. If you want to see it for yourself. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 from these jumper tiles here. So that's in place. This just sits right on top with that gear lining up. Let me press that down. Why does that seem off by half? Oh, there we go. The gear wasn't quite sitting right, so now that the gear is sitting right, that lines up perfectly. And we've got the gear engaged, so if we give it a drive, you'll see the rotation. Again, like that other side where we have two universal joints together, make sure that they are sitting in opposite positioning so that the elevator will rotate on an even pace and not rotate chunky or in an odd pattern. Let's put our ball hoppers in and we'll fill it up with balls and see how it runs. So remember, this is our front hopper because it has that cutaway. So take this front hopper and we'll just wiggle it into place right there with that cutaway. This goes right to the front edge of the platform, of the board, base plate, whatever you want to call it. There we go. Press it down on all 6 points. And our back one goes into the same place, but on the back, lined up with the base of the elevator. Just like that. All right, and I have such confidence in this device. Let's just pull this whole thing in. Let's fill it up with balls in the back here. Let's make sure none fall out just yet. They will as the machine runs, not to worry. Now there's one last timing thing we're going to set up, and that's the elevator. If it drops balls at exactly the wrong time, they'll get stuck as this is moving forward, and it'll actually cause this to jam. So let's get this fired up. Keeping an eye on Bob at all times. That's actually looking good. Look at that. Got ourselves one working ball factory. Everything moving along in its place. The ball's loading. Oh. That doesn't look good. So, one bucket missed. Ended up with probably 2 balls that fell and hit the ground because there was no bucket to catch them. These are just things you got to keep your eye on when you're running it. Unfortunately, this isn't the type of machine you can just set up and leave running under a glass case for days on end, although I would love to get it to that point. There's definitely a desire to have this be able to be put in a display and run continuously. Unfortunately, that's not the case just yet. So as you can see, let's get this fired up. So there you have it, the timing and final build of the ball factory, as well as the changes. So there you have it, the final build and timing of the ball factory with all the changes to make it run more smoothly. There's always going to be improvements happening to this. I'm sure the next time I build it, it's going to undergo a couple of revisions, at which point I'll try and post something to show it and make sure that this is becoming the best possible build. Other than that, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, follow me on Google+, and look forward to the next build. Talk to you soon.